My name's Vera. I'm 32. And until that night, I thought my family just loved me quietly. But one phone call changed everything. Mom and I were finishing a normal chat, about groceries, work, small things. Then she forgot to hang up. And what I heard next froze me. Words that made my heart ache in ways I can't even explain. Living with him, after what he did, I could never. Where are you watching from? Comment below. And don't forget to subscribe for more real stories about family, betrayal, and courage. The sound that came after her sentence was silence. Thick, heavy silence. I didn't even breathe. My thumb hovered over the end call button, but I couldn't move. I sat there, phone pressed against my ear, eyes fixed on the kitchen wall like it could explain what I'd just heard. The clock ticked loudly. My heart did too. Mom's voice came back, quieter this time, like she'd moved closer to my sister. She doesn't remember. Aaron, she said. And then my sister's voice, cautious, almost pitying. You think she ever will? I didn't know what they were talking about, but the way they said she felt like they weren't just talking about me. They were protecting themselves from me. A soft, clinking sound, maybe a cup being set down. Then Mom whispered, "It's better that way." That line broke me in half. I wanted to say something. I wanted to hang up, call back, and scream. What don't I remember? What did I do? But my throat locked. My palms were sweating. The call ended on there, and a few seconds later, just like that, click. Silence. I sat at the table long after, staring at the phone screen. My reflection looked different, like I'd just seen a stranger in myself. The next morning, I told myself I must have misunderstood. Maybe they were talking about something else, some family friend, some random person. But deep down, I knew. You can feel when you're the ghost in someone else's story. I didn't tell anyone what I'd heard. Not my coworker, not my best friend. It felt too strange to explain. Hey, I think my mom forgot to hang up and called me an unspeakable problem doesn't exactly make good coffee break conversation. Instead, I spent the day pretending to be okay. I went to work, typed emails, smiled at customers, but my head was somewhere else, spinning around those words. Living with him after what he did. Why him? Why not her? Was she talking about my dad? About me? But then Aaron's voice, "You think she'll remember?" made it clear. It was about me. That night, I barely slept. I stared at the ceiling, counting the faint flashes of passing cars through my blinds. Every little sound made me jump. At one point, I got up and looked through old photo albums, family birthdays, beach trips, Christmas mornings, but even those pictures suddenly looked strange. In every smile, I saw something I hadn't noticed before: distance. Mom's arm always around Aaron. My dad always on the edge of the frame. And me somewhere slightly out of focus. It was like I'd never really belonged in those photos. By morning, I was exhausted. My eyes were swollen, and I felt hollow. I made myself coffee, but it tasted like cardboard. I knew I couldn't just ignore it. I texted Erin, "Hey, can we talk? Just random sister stuff." She replied a few minutes later, "Sure, call you later." I spent the whole day waiting for that call, waiting like a kid waiting for bad news they already know is coming. When she finally called, I tried to sound casual. We talked about the weather, her job, some TV show she liked. But my heart was pounding the whole time. Then I said it. "Hey, last night, after Mom and I hung up, I think I might have overheard you guys talking." Silence. I could hear her breathing. Then she said, slowly, "Oh, you heard that?" My chest tightened. "Yeah, what did Mom mean by what I did? Aaron, did I do something?" There was another long pause. Then her voice softened. "Vera, maybe you should talk to Mom. It's not really something I can explain." My heart sank. "Aaron, please, just tell me." But she said only, "It's old. Really old. Just talk to Mom, okay? And then she hung up. I sat there, phone still in my hand, feeling like the ground had vanished. Old. What did old mean? Something from years ago? Something I'd forgotten? I started to remember flashes, maybe memories, maybe imagination. Mom crying once in the kitchen, Dad slamming a door, me standing in the hallway, maybe 10 years old, clutching something. A toy? A photo? It was blurry, but it was there, like an old film reel stuck halfway through a frame. I decided to call Mom again that evening. When she picked up, her voice was calm. Too calm. "Hi, sweetie," she said. "Hey, Mom," I answered, trying to sound normal. We talked about her garden, about how the tomatoes were finally coming in, about nothing. Finally, I asked, "Hey, when you talked to Aaron last night, you said something about me, about what I did. What did you mean?" The silence that followed was longer than I expected. Then she said, "Oh, Vera, you must have misunderstood. We were just talking about something else." I knew that tone. It was her "let's not do this" voice, soft but sharp underneath. "No, Mom." I pressed. "I heard my name. You said she doesn't remember." "What don't I remember?" Her voice changed, lower, defensive. "You're reading too much into it. Sometimes you think you hear things that aren't there." That stung. "Mom, I heard it. You said you could never live with me after what I did." She took a breath. "Vera, I'm not having this conversation right now. I love you, okay? Let's talk about it another time." And she hung up. Just like that. I sat in silence, staring at my phone again. That's when I realized she wasn't denying what she said. She was denying why. That difference mattered. It meant she knew exactly what I was talking about. The next few days felt long and slow. Every time my phone buzzed, I hoped it was her calling back, ready to explain. But she didn't. So I started digging. I went through old boxes in my apartment, the kind you move with but never unpack. Inside, I found old report cards, letters, drawings from when I was a kid. Most of it was normal, but one photo made my stomach turn. It was me and my little brother, Nathan. He couldn't have been more than 5. I was maybe 8. We were in the backyard, near the big oak tree, both laughing. But the corner of the photo was torn, and it looked like someone had tried to rip him out of it. Why would anyone do that? I stared at that photo for hours. I hadn't thought about Nathan in years. He died when I was young. That's what Mom always said. He passed in his sleep. But now I wasn't sure. Those missing pieces, the silence, the way they changed the subject every time I asked about him. It all felt connected. The phrase from the call replayed over and over in my head like a broken record. Living with her after what she did. I could never. What if what I did wasn't something small? What if it was him? That night, I had a dream. I was back in the old house. Nathan was laughing, running across the yard. The swing set creaked. He called my name. And then there was a sound, a snap, a scream. I woke up shaking, sweat on my neck, heart racing. It didn't feel like a dream. It felt like a memory trying to crawl out. The next morning, I made a decision. I needed to go home. Not for a visit, for answers. It had been years since I'd stepped foot in that house. I'd avoided it, telling myself I was too busy, that the memories were just too heavy. But now I realized I wasn't avoiding memories. I was avoiding the truth. As I packed an overnight bag, I noticed something I hadn't in a long time, a small scar on my wrist, almost hidden under the skin. I couldn't remember how I got it, but somehow it felt connected. I ran my fingers over it and whispered, "What did I do, Nathan?" And though there was no answer, I swear I could still hear the swing creaking somewhere far away, like the past reminding me it wasn't done with me yet. I couldn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard their voices again, my mom's calm tone turning sharp, my dad's heavy sigh. and that sentence echoing like a whisper inside my skull. Living with her was never supposed to be permanent. Those words wouldn't stop replaying, twisting and unraveling everything I thought I knew about my family. The next morning, I sat at the kitchen table pretending to eat cereal. My spoon clinked against the bowl, the milk untouched, my eyes fixed on the reflection of my parents moving around like nothing had happened. Mom was humming softly, flipping pancakes, and Dad was reading the newspaper, his glasses sliding down his nose like always. Everything looked so normal that it almost felt like a dream. But inside, something had cracked. "Morning, sweetheart," Mom said with her usual smile. "Morning," I replied, forcing my voice to sound light. But my gaze lingered on her face, searching for guilt, discomfort, anything. Nothing. She looked the same as every morning, hair tied neatly, eyes warm, movements calm. How could she say those things last night? How could she talk about me like I was some stranger living under her roof? Dad glanced up from his paper. "You've got that essay due today, right?" "Yeah," I mumbled, stirring my cereal, pretending to eat. He nodded, not really looking at me. It felt like the world had gone out of sync, like the people I knew were suddenly actors in a play, reading from a script I hadn't seen. When I left for school, the chill in the air bit at my skin, but it was nothing compared to the cold in my chest. The bus ride blurred past. I didn't talk to anyone. My best friend, Mia, sat beside me, trying to get me to laugh at some TikTok she'd saved, but I couldn't focus. My head was a maze of questions. What did they mean? Living with her wasn't supposed to be permanent. Who was I then? After school, I went straight home, half hoping I'd find something that would explain everything, maybe old photos, letters, or even adoption papers. But the house was spotless, like always. Mom was meticulous. Every drawer was perfectly organized. Still, I started small, the hallway cabinet, receipts, old phone chargers, nothing. Then, in the attic, I found a dusty cardboard box labeled Vera, baby stuff. My heart skipped. It was tucked behind holiday decorations and old books. I pulled it down, coughing as the dust rose around me. Inside were things I half remembered: a yellow baby blanket, tiny pink shoes, a rattle shaped like a bunny. And then a photo. It was me. I must have been 2 or 3, sitting on a woman's lap. But the woman wasn't Mom. She had softer features, brown eyes instead of blue, and a smile that looked familiar in a way I couldn't explain. Behind us was a faded sign that read Maplewood Park. I'd never been there. My heart started racing. Who was she? Before I could think, I heard footsteps downstairs, Mom's voice calling, "Vera, dinner's ready." I shoved everything back in the box and slid it behind the storage bins again. That night, at dinner, I kept stealing glances at her. "Everything okay? Honey?" she asked when I barely touched my food. "Yeah, just tired." But I wasn't tired. I was terrified. When I went back to my room, I opened my laptop and searched Maplewood Park. It was in another town, 2 hours away. My hands trembled as I zoomed in on the images. There it was, the same old fountain from the photo. It wasn't my imagination. That woman had held me there once. Why had my parents never mentioned her? The next few days were torture. Every small thing started feeling like a clue. The way Dad hesitated when I mentioned childhood memories. The way Mom changed the subject whenever I asked about old photos. One afternoon, I brought up my baby pictures casually, pretending to smile. "Hey, Mom, remember that pink onesie I used to wear? The one with the ducks?" She froze. Just for a second, a flicker of hesitation before she smiled again. "Oh, you remember that? You were barely 1. But I didn't remember it. Not really. I'd seen it once in a picture that wasn't even in our house. That tiny pause in her voice, it told me everything. A week later, I decided I couldn't just keep pretending. I took the bus to Maplewood Park. The air smelled like pine and something faintly sweet, like old memories. I walked past the fountain, the benches, and the playground. Nothing triggered a memory, but when I sat on one of the swings, an odd feeling came over me, like I had been there before. A flash, a woman's laugh, the smell of cinnamon, a lullaby. Then it was gone. I checked my phone, scrolling through the photos from the box. The woman's face glowed on the screen. I showed it to an older lady sitting nearby. "Excuse me, do you know this woman?" She squinted. She used to come here years ago, always with a little girl, but I can't recall her name. They just stopped coming one day. "Do you know where she lived?" I asked, trying not to sound desperate. The lady shook her head. "Sorry, dear, but she was kind. You could tell she loved that child." My chest tightened. That child was me, back home. I stood outside our house for a long time before going in. I didn't want to face them, but I couldn't keep pretending either. The moment I stepped inside, Mom was in the kitchen, humming again, like everything was fine. "Mom," I said softly. She turned, smiling. "Hey, you're home early. Can we talk?" Her smile faltered. "Of course. What's wrong?" I pulled out the photo from my pocket, hands shaking. "Who is she?" Her face drained of color. She stared at the picture, silent. The clock ticked loudly between us. "Vera," she began, her voice low, "where did you get this?" "The attic," I said. "Who is she? Why was I with her?" She looked away, pressing her hand to her chest like she couldn't breathe. "You weren't supposed to find that. So it's true." My voice broke. "Who is she? Why did you say I wasn't supposed to live here permanently?" Her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't answer. Then Dad walked in, holding his phone, clearly sensing the tension. "What's going on? Tell me the truth," I demanded. "Who am I?" They exchanged a look, the kind that carried years of secrets. Dad set his phone down slowly. "Vera, there's a lot you don't understand." "Then make me understand." Mom sat down, her shoulders trembling. "The woman in that picture, her name was Emily." The name hit me like a wave. Emily. It felt familiar, though I couldn't place why. Mom hesitated. "She was your biological mother." My knees went weak. I had to hold on to the counter. "What?" Dad's voice was soft, but steady. "Emily was your mom's cousin. She passed away when you were 4. We took you in after that." The world tilted. I blinked, trying to process it. "You took me in?" My voice cracked. "You mean I was never yours?" "You are ours," Mom whispered. "In every way that matters." "But you lied." Tears spilled down her face. "We didn't lie. We just didn't tell you everything. You were so young. We wanted you to feel safe, to feel like you belonged." My heart pounded as I stumbled back. The memories, the lullaby, the scent of cinnamon, that park, they weren't dreams. They were fragments of a life I'd forgotten. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" Mom reached for me, but I stepped away. "Because losing her broke us too," she said. "Emily was like my sister. She made me promise that if anything happened to her, I'd raise you as my own. I thought I could protect you from the pain." Dad added quietly, "We wanted you to have a normal life, Vera." Normal. The word felt cruel. Nothing about this felt normal. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. My chest felt hollow. My entire childhood, every memory, every family photo, every story, it all felt rewritten. I thought about Emily, her smile in that photo, the way that stranger at the park said she loved that child. And then I thought about Mom, or the woman I'd called Mom all my life, crying at the kitchen table, terrified of losing me. My memories didn't match anymore. Half of them were built on truth, the other half on silence. But underneath all that confusion, one thought kept me awake. If they could hide something this big, what else didn't I know? The next morning, I didn't speak to them. I got dressed, left early, and took the bus without breakfast. I stared out the window, my reflection staring back. A face I wasn't sure belonged to anyone anymore. In school, Mia noticed immediately. "You okay?" I shook my head. "No." We sat under the big oak tree at lunch, and I told her everything. The call, the photo, the truth. She didn't interrupt once. "Vera," she said, "finally, that's a lot. But you deserve to know who you are." I nodded, tears stinging my eyes. "Yeah, I just don't know where to start." She put her hand on mine. "Start with the truth, even if it hurts." That night, I went back to the attic. I opened the box again, carefully this time. Beneath the blanket, I found a small envelope with my name written in faded ink. My heart raced as I opened it. Inside was a letter. "My sweet Vera," it began. "If you're reading this, it means you're old enough to know the truth. I love you more than words can say. If I can't be there, I want you to know you are strong, you are loved, and you will never be alone." Tears blurred the ink. The signature at the bottom read, "Love, Mom, Emily." My breath caught. For the first time, I heard her voice in my head, not as a memory, but as a feeling. Warm, gentle, real. And just like that, everything shifted again. Because now, I wasn't just the girl who heard a call she wasn't supposed to. I was the girl trying to piece together a life she never knew she had. And something deep inside told me, this story wasn't over yet. I read that letter at least 10 times before I realized my hands were shaking. The paper felt fragile, like it could crumble if I breathed too hard, yet it held a weight heavier than anything I'd ever known. My real mother's handwriting, small, curved, and neat, looped across the page like a whisper from a ghost. Each word seemed to reach through time and touch something raw inside me. But one word, right at the end, wouldn't leave me alone. Home. The way she'd written it, underlined twice, made it feel important, like she wasn't talking about the house I grew up in, but somewhere else entirely, somewhere she wanted me to find. That night, sleep didn't come easily. I kept thinking about Emily, about the way her name felt both strange and familiar. I'd never seen her face in motion, never heard her voice, but now I could almost imagine it. Warm, patient, maybe a little tired. When dawn came, pale light spilling through my curtains, I made a decision that felt like jumping off a cliff. I was going to visit her home. By mid-morning, I was packing a small backpack. My hands moved automatically, a water bottle, a hoodie, the letter folded neatly inside my notebook. I told my parents I was going to Mia's house for the weekend. Mom nodded, still fragile around me, still afraid to push. "Be careful, honey," she said softly. I managed a small smile. "I will." As soon as I was out the door, I exhaled like I'd been holding my breath for days. I checked the envelope again, searching for a clue. On the back, faintly pressed into the paper, were numbers, maybe an address. 42 Alder Street. I looked it up. It was only 2 towns over. My heart pounded. This was real. The bus ride to Alder Street felt endless. Outside, the scenery blurred. Rows of houses, gas stations, stretches of highway that all looked the same. But when the driver called out the stop, something inside me shifted. The town looked old-fashioned, like time had forgotten it. The air smelled faintly of pine, and something sweet, maybe wildflowers. I followed the cracked sidewalk until I found it, a small white house with peeling paint, a sagging porch, and a wind chime that jingled in the breeze. Number 42. I stood there for a full minute before walking up the steps. My knees felt weak. The mailbox still had a faded sticker that read, "The Lanes." Emily Lane. It was her. The door was locked, Of course. But when I peeked through the dusty window, I saw everything frozen in place, furniture covered in sheets, sunlight spilling across a wooden floor, and a single framed picture hanging crooked on the wall. I pressed my forehead against the glass. The house felt quiet, but not empty. It felt like it was waiting. Just then, a voice startled me. "Can I help you?" I spun around to see an elderly woman standing by the fence, holding a basket of laundry. Her hair was silver, her eyes sharp but kind. I stammered. "I used to know someone who lived here. Emily Lane." The woman's expression softened instantly. "Oh, Emily. Sweet girl. You must be," she tilted her head, studying me. "You're Vera, aren't you?" My heart nearly stopped. "You knew her?" "Of course I did," she said, setting the basket down. "We were neighbors for years. I used to babysit you when she worked late at the library. The air left my lungs. You did." She nodded, smiling sadly. "You loved storybooks. Always asked me to read The Little Prince before bed." I blinked, the memory flickering faintly in the back of my mind. A voice reading softly, a lamp's golden glow, the smell of lavender. "Would you like to come in?" she asked. "I still have the spare key." Inside, the house smelled faintly of dust and old paper. She pushed open the door, and sunlight poured across the floorboards. Everything looked untouched, as if Emily had just stepped out and would be back any moment. The woman, Mrs. Collins, she introduced herself, handed me the key. I kept it safe, just in case someone came looking. I swallowed hard. "Thank you." As she left me alone inside, the silence wrapped around me like a blanket and a blade all at once. Every creak of the floor, every mote of dust in the air, felt alive with memory. I wandered slowly from room to room. There was a small couch, a coffee table stacked with books, a piano in the corner with sheet music still open to a song called Autumn Sky. Then I saw it. On the mantel, a row of photos. Emily holding me as a baby, laughing at something off camera. Another of her standing in front of a library, books in her arms. And then one more, Emily with Mom, my adoptive mother. They were smiling together, their arms around each other. My chest ached. They had been close, truly close. This wasn't betrayal. This was love tangled in loss. I sat on the couch, clutching the letter again. "I'm here," I whispered, voice trembling. "I found it, Mom." The air seemed to hum, like the house had heard me. I don't know how long I sat there, but eventually I started looking through her things. Not out of curiosity, but out of need to know her, to fill in the blanks of who I was. In the bedroom, I found a drawer filled with notebooks, all labeled by year. I opened one. June 8th, Vera's first word, moon. She kept pointing at the night sky and giggling. I smiled through tears. Another entry read, November. She fell asleep in my arms today. I wish I could freeze this moment forever. I don't know how long I'll have, but I'll make every day count. My breath hitched. How long I'll have? I flipped through more pages. Each entry was shorter than the last, as if she'd been getting weaker. Until the final one. If I can't stay, promise me she'll never feel unloved. Promise me she'll grow up safe, even if it means she forgets me. That's when it hit me. She had been sick, and she knew. I pressed the notebook to my chest, tears spilling freely now. You didn't want me to forget, I whispered. You wanted me to live. Outside, the light had shifted. The late afternoon glow slanting through the window, painting the walls in gold. The wind chime on the porch rang softly. That's when I heard a faint knock. I wiped my eyes and turned. A man stood at the door, tall, maybe in his 30s, with the same warm brown eyes as Emily. Sorry, he said, his voice uncertain. I didn't mean to intrude. I just saw someone inside. This house, it used to belong to my aunt. My heart skipped. Emily Lane? He nodded slowly. Yeah, you knew her. I swallowed. I'm her daughter. His eyes widened. For a second, he didn't speak. Then he stepped forward, stunned. You're Vera. Wait, you knew about me. He nodded, emotion flickering across his face. I'm Daniel, Emily's nephew. She used to tell me stories about you all the time. I was just a kid, but I remember her saying you had the brightest laugh. The words broke something inside me all over again. We sat on the porch for hours talking as the sky turned orange and then purple. Daniel told me how Emily used to host neighborhood readings for children, how she'd bake cookies shaped like stars because she said stories deserved magic. She loved you more than anything, he said quietly. When she got sick, she fought harder every day because she wanted to stay for you. What happened to her? I asked softly. He hesitated. It was sudden, in the end. She didn't want you to see her like that. Your mom. Well, your adoptive mom. She was with her until the last day. They made that promise together. I closed my eyes, the ache in my chest deeper but clearer. She kept her promise. I whispered. Daniel nodded. She did. And Emily never doubted she would. For the first time since this all began, I felt something loosen inside me. Not closure, not yet, but understanding. When Daniel left, he handed me a small wooden box. She wanted this saved for you. Inside were little keepsakes, a charm bracelet, a folded drawing of a house under a rainbow, a tiny silver locket. Inside the locket was a picture of her and me, cheek to cheek. On the back, engraved so faintly I almost missed it, were the words, no matter where you go, you'll always find your way home. I pressed it to my heart. The letter had led me here. The word home had been her map. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I locked the house and stood on the porch one last time. The air was cool, the wind gentle. For a moment, I could almost feel her there, not as a ghost, but as warmth, presence, love. I whispered into the twilight, I'll come back. I promise. And as I walked back toward the bus stop, I realized something. Maybe the home she wanted me to find wasn't just this place. Maybe it was the truth itself. The courage to face it, to carry it, and still keep living. The wind chimes sang behind me as I left, like a quiet goodbye that wasn't really an ending at all. That night, when I returned to the house I'd grown up in, I didn't go to my room right away. Mom and Dad were in the living room, sitting close, the TV flickering softly. When they saw me, Mom's eyes filled with relief and fear. You're home, she whispered. I looked at her, at the woman who had lied to protect me, who had kept a promise that wasn't even hers to make. And suddenly I saw not a stranger, but a bridge between the life I'd lost and the one I'd been given, between two mothers who had loved me in different ways. I didn't say anything at first. I just walked forward and hugged her. For a moment, she froze. Then she wrapped her arms around me, so tightly it hurt, the kind of hug that said, I'm sorry, and I love you all at once. And in that quiet space, I finally understood, sometimes home isn't a place. It's a truth you stop running from. The wind outside was restless that night, scraping dry leaves against the window pane, like tiny fingers begging to be heard. I sat on the edge of my bed, motionless, my hands trembling as I tried to piece together the fragments that had been haunting me since my visit home. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw flickers, half-formed images that didn't belong to my memory, yet they carried the undeniable weight of something real, something I wasn't supposed to know. It began subtly, a scent, that same sharp, metallic tang of rain on rust. I'd caught it before, back in the attic, but now it lingered in my room as though it had followed me. I turned on the lamp, scanning the corners. Nothing, but my heart was pounding as if the shadows were listening. I reached for my phone to distract myself, but the screen glitched just for a second, showing an image that shouldn't have been there. A picture of me, as a child, standing in front of our old house. Only the background wasn't quite right. The windows looked darker, boarded up, and someone, a faint silhouette, stood behind me in the reflection. I blinked, and the image was gone, replaced by the normal home screen. I froze. My breath caught in my throat. Was I losing my mind, or was something or someone trying to remind me of what I'd forgotten? That night, I couldn't sleep. The air felt heavier, filled with the kind of silence that pressed against your ears until you imagined whispers. I found myself walking downstairs without even deciding to. My feet moved on their own, guided by something buried deep in my mind. The wooden steps creaked, echoing louder than usual. The house smelled faintly of dust and old books, but beneath that was something else, something colder. When I reached the bottom of the stairs, I noticed the basement door, slightly ajar. We'd never used the basement. My parents had told me it was unsafe, that the floorboards were weak, and the wiring was faulty. But in that moment, the excuse felt flimsy, like a cover story for something much darker. The door groaned as I pushed it open. The scent of damp earth hit me immediately, mixed with the faint trace of something burned. I flicked the light switch. Nothing. Of course. Still, I stepped down, phone flashlight trembling in my hand. Every step creaked under my weight, the sound swallowed by the thick silence. My pulse quickened when the beam of light caught a corner of the basement I'd never seen before, an area hidden behind an old metal shelving unit. I pulled at it. It resisted, then slid just enough to reveal a narrow space behind. There, covered in a thin film of dust, was an old chest. It looked ancient, with warped brass hinges tarnished. I knelt in front of it, tracing my fingers across the lid. My name was carved faintly into the surface. My name. I didn't remember ever seeing it before. My stomach twisted as I lifted the lid. Inside were objects wrapped in faded cloth, childhood drawings, a small cracked mirror, and a red ribbon tied around a bundle of photographs. My hands shook as I unwrapped them. The first photo made my skin crawl. It was a picture of me, maybe 7 years old, standing in the same garden I remembered playing in, but next to me was a girl. My height, my face. Only her eyes were different, cold, empty. I flipped through the rest, each one showing both of us in different places, always side by side, always identical. In one, we wore matching dresses. In another, we sat on the same swing set, but in the background my mother looked frightened, as if she'd been caught doing something she shouldn't. A whisper crept into my ear, so suddenly that I dropped the photos. You were never supposed to see that. I spun around, heart slamming in my chest. No one, just shadows stretching across the stone wall. My phone light flickered once, then died completely. I stood in darkness. My breath came fast and shallow. Somewhere above, I heard faint footsteps, slow, deliberate, moving across the floor. Someone else was in the house. By the time I reached the top of the stairs, the lights in the hallway were on. My mother was standing there, pale and rigid, holding a cup that trembled in her hand. "What were you doing down there?" she asked quietly, though her tone carried something sharp beneath the calm. I hesitated. I couldn't sleep. I thought I heard something. She set the cup down, eyes never leaving mine. "That part of the house isn't safe. You know that." "There's a box," I said before I could stop myself, "with my name on it, and photos of me and someone who looks exactly like." "Stop." Her voice cracked like a whip. I froze. She stepped closer, her face pale but her eyes fierce. "Listen to me carefully. You never went down there. You didn't see anything. Do you understand? But, do you understand? She repeated, her voice trembling now. Something inside me broke a little. The fear in her eyes wasn't for me. It was for what I might uncover. I nodded slowly. Good. She forced a weak smile that didn't reach her eyes. Go to bed, sweetheart. You've had a long day. I obeyed, though sleep never came. The image of that other girl, my mirror twin, was burned behind my eyelids. The next morning, the chest was gone. The basement looked untouched, dust undisturbed, as though I'd imagined the whole thing. But I knew what I saw, and then, like a cruel twist of fate, I found a note slipped under my door. It was written in shaky handwriting I didn't recognize. They can erase what you see, but not what you feel. Don't trust the photographs. Trust the fear. I stared at it for a long time, my pulse racing. Who wrote this? My mother avoided me all day. My father was unusually quiet, pretending everything was fine. But their glances at each other told me otherwise. That evening, as the house settled into its usual nighttime hum, I locked myself in my room and opened my journal. I needed to write it down, to anchor the fragments before they faded like dreams. But as I wrote, memories began surfacing that I couldn't explain. A white room, the sound of humming machines, a cold hand on my forehead, and a voice saying, "This one stays, the other goes." I dropped the pen. My whole body went cold. The following day, I drove to the town's old records office. The woman behind the counter gave me a polite smile as I asked for documents about my birth year. She returned a few minutes later with a folder. "There's not much left from that year," she said. "Fire took out most of the archives, but you can look through what's here." I thanked her and opened the file. Inside were hospital logs, birth certificates, faded but legible. I flipped through the list of names until I found mine, and right beneath it, another name. Lena, same last name, same date, same time. My breath caught. Twins. I wasn't an only child. But why had no one ever told me? And why did every record after that day list only one living child? When I got home, the air felt heavier again. The curtains were drawn. My mother sat at the table, staring at nothing. "You went looking, didn't you?" she said softly before I even spoke. I didn't answer. She nodded slowly, tears forming in her eyes. I told them this would happen, that you'd start remembering. "Who?" My voice shook. "Who did you tell?" She looked up, and for the first time, I saw exhaustion etched deep in her face. "The people who helped us forget." I took a step back. "What does that mean?" "There were two of you," she whispered, "but one wasn't supposed to exist." The words hit me like a blow. "You're saying—" "She wasn't normal," my mother interrupted, her voice breaking. "She knew things, said things before they happened. The doctors said it was impossible, that both of you couldn't survive. But you did, and she changed." I shook my head, trying to breathe. "Where is she?" Her lips trembled. "Gone. They said they took her somewhere safe. But the night she disappeared, I heard her scream your name. That night, I couldn't stay in the house. I packed a bag and drove aimlessly until dawn, my mind racing with fragments of half-remembered screams and flashes of a girl's face. My face, crying in the dark. At sunrise, I stopped by the old bridge, near the woods, the one I used to visit as a kid. The mist hung low over the water. For a moment, it was peaceful. Then I saw her, standing on the opposite side of the bridge. Same clothes, same hair, same face. But her smile wasn't mine. The world seemed to tilt, sound fading into silence as she raised her hand slowly, and mouthed words I couldn't hear, but somehow understood. "You remember now." The air around me grew colder. My reflection in the river rippled, then split in two. That was the moment I realized the truth. What I wasn't supposed to remember wasn't just a lost sibling. It was something far stranger, something that blurred the lines between memory and existence itself. Because maybe she was never gone. Maybe she was the part of me that wasn't meant to survive, still waiting, watching, trying to come back. And in that reflection, for the first time, I couldn't tell which one of us was real. The morning after the bridge felt unreal, like the world had shifted slightly on its axis, and no one but me noticed. I woke up in my car, parked under the skeletal branches of an oak tree, the sky washed in shades of silver and ash. My breath fogged the windshield as I sat there, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles ached. Her face, my face, still hovered in my mind, lips forming words I could never unhear. You remember now, but what did that even mean? As I drove back home, every mile stretched like a lifetime. The radio stayed off. The silence was thick enough to drown in. Houses passed by like strangers wearing familiar faces. The town looked the same, but I didn't belong in it anymore. Every brick, every street corner felt like it was holding a secret I was too afraid to ask. When I finally pulled into the driveway, my mother was already standing at the door. She must have been watching for me. Her eyes were swollen from crying, though she pretended otherwise. "You shouldn't have gone," she said, voice fragile as tissue. I saw her. I whispered. The words hung between us like a storm about to break. My mother's expression didn't change, but the color drained from her face. She gripped the doorframe for balance. "No, that's not possible." "She was real, Mom." My voice cracked. She looked at me, spoke to me. My mother's lips trembled. "You're tired, confused. You've been—" "Stop," I cut in. "I know what I saw, and I think she's been trying to reach me for years." For a moment, I thought she might deny it again, but instead, her shoulders slumped. She closed the door softly and motioned for me to sit. The living room felt smaller, suffocating almost. The smell of old wood and lemon polish lingered in the air. My mother sat across from me, wringing her hands. "She wasn't supposed to find you," she said, finally. That sentence was enough to make my chest tighten. "What are you talking about?" "She was never supposed to come back." Her voice trembled. "We made sure of it." "Who's we?" "The people who helped us forget," she said again. "They told us it was the only way to keep you safe." "Safe from what?" The question burned inside me, but before I could speak, she continued, almost whispering. "When you were little, strange things started happening. Lights flickering, objects moving, and sometimes you'd talk to someone who wasn't there. You'd say it was your sister." A chill crawled down my spine. She said things, my mother continued, things no child could know. About the house, about us, about the future. And then, one night, she told me she wasn't supposed to exist. That you were the real one, and she was the mistake. The room seemed to tilt slightly, like the air had turned heavier. "You believed her?" "I didn't want to." My mother's eyes glistened. But then the doctors came. They said she was unstable, that she needed help. They took her, and we were told never to speak of her again. I pressed my palms against my temples, fighting the growing storm in my head. "And you just agreed? You let them erase her." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "I thought I was protecting you. They promised she'd forget. They promised you both would live peacefully, separately." I stood up, heart hammering in my chest. Well, it didn't work, because I remember now, and she's still out there. That night, I couldn't stay in the house. The walls felt too close, the air too thick, with everything unsaid. So I drove again, no destination, just motion. The headlights cut through the fog, as if searching for a path that didn't exist. Every so often, I'd catch glimpses of movement in the rearview mirror, a flicker, a shadow. Each time I turned, nothing, but the feeling of being watched never faded. Eventually, I found myself at the edge of town, where the streetlights thinned out and the road turned to gravel. A sign half hidden by weeds read, St. Helena's Home for Children. The name struck me like a memory. I didn't know why, but my chest tightened and my pulse quickened. The gate hung crooked, the building beyond it swallowed by vines and darkness. Abandoned long ago by the look of it. Yet something inside pulled me forward. The door creaked open with a sound that made my skin crawl. Dust danced in the flashlight beam as I stepped inside. Faded murals of smiling children stretched along cracked walls. And then I saw it, a small metal plate, rusted but still legible. Room 13, Isolation Wing. The number echoed in my mind like a whisper. 13. The same number scratched into the back of that old photograph. I walked down the hallway, each step stirring echoes of the past. The smell of damp wood and mildew clung to the air. When I reached the door marked 13, I stopped. The handle was cold under my fingers. My pulse roared in my ears as I turned it. Inside, the air was colder, stale with age. The walls were covered in faded drawings, crayon sketches of two girls holding hands, smiling. The handwriting underneath, one of them read, "Me and her, always together." My throat tightened, and then, from the corner of the room, I heard the faintest sound. A whisper. Finally, I froze. The light flickered once, and when it steadied, she was there, not in flesh, but reflected in the cracked mirror on the far wall. Her face identical to mine, her eyes glistening with a mix of sadness and something else, something ancient. "You took your time," she said softly. My breath hitched. "Who are you?" She tilted her head, smiling faintly. "You already know." No, I shook my head. "You're not real. You're just a memory," she finished for me. "That's what they told you, isn't it?" I stepped closer, anger and fear twisting inside me. "Why are you doing this? What do you want?" "I want the truth," she said, her voice firm now. "You have what was taken from me. My name, my life, my place." The air in the room thickened, pressing against my chest. "That's not true. You're not." "Lena," she interrupted, "that's who I was. Before they took me away. Before they made you forget." Her voice cracked then, raw with emotion. "Do you know what it's like to be erased? To scream until your voice fades into nothing?" I swallowed hard. "I didn't know." "I know," she said softly. "That's why I came back. Not to hurt you, but to make you remember." Her words struck something deep inside me. For the first time, I didn't feel fear. I felt sorrow. Hours passed, maybe minutes, maybe years. Time didn't exist in that room. We talked, both of us trembling between guilt and grief. She told me everything. The experiments, the false memories, the years she spent locked away under the pretense of treatment. "They made me forget my name," she whispered. "But not you. Never you." Tears burned in my eyes. "I didn't ask for any of this." "I know," she said, "but you can end it. You just have to tell them the truth." "What truth?" "That I exist. That they were wrong to bury me. That we were both real." Her reflection flickered, her face growing dimmer. "Say it aloud. Tell the world." The next day, I woke up in my car again, parked outside St. Helena's. The building was gone, or maybe it had never been there at all. My hands trembled as I stared at the empty field before me, but I knew what I had to do. I drove straight to the police station. The morning sun glared off the windshield, blinding and pure. My heart thudded as I walked in, every step heavier than the last. "I need to report something," I said to the officer at the desk. He looked up, pen poised. "Name." I hesitated. then said quietly, there were two of us, two daughters. My sister, she was taken. And I need to tell you what really happened. The officer's expression shifted from confusion to concern. Miss, slow down. Who took her? I swallowed. The same people who made everyone forget. He exchanged a look with his partner, one that said he wasn't sure whether to take me seriously. But I didn't care. The words kept spilling out. Everything, the photographs, the basement, the home, the reflection. When I finished, the station was silent. The officer finally spoke. Do you have proof? I smiled weakly. Just me. He sighed, scribbling notes. We'll look into it. In the meantime, maybe you should get some rest. I finished for him. Yeah, that's what everyone says. When I got home, my mother was sitting by the window, eyes red. They called. She whispered. The police. I nodded. I told them. For a moment, she didn't respond. Then, slowly, she exhaled. You did the right thing. Her hand trembled as she reached for mine. Maybe now we can stop pretending. That night, I dreamt of her again. But this time, she wasn't standing across a river or behind glass. She was beside me, smiling softly. You did it, she said. I nodded. I told them everything. Her hand brushed mine, warm and real. Then we're free. When I woke, the morning light poured through the window like a gentle promise. For the first time in years, the house didn't feel haunted. It felt whole. On the wall, where my childhood photos hung, there was a new one. A photo I'd never seen before. Two little girls sitting side by side, grinning, their arms around each other. Underneath, written in faded ink, were 4 simple words. The day we were one. And for the first time, I spoke the truth out loud, just to hear it. My name is Lena. It's been 3 months since that day, since the day I finally told the truth. The police reports were filed, the interviews recorded, and the official letters mailed. Nothing dramatic happened after that. No arrests. No grand headlines. The world didn't stop or suddenly understand, but something inside me did. I stopped running. For the first time, I learned how to sit still and breathe without waiting for a shadow to move. The nightmares didn't vanish overnight, but they lost their power. Every time the whispers returned, every time the mirror flickered or the wind carried her voice, I didn't flinch. I listened, because maybe, just maybe, she wasn't haunting me anymore. Maybe she was guiding me. I still live in the same house, the same creaky floors, the same porch swing that groans when the wind picks up. But the silence isn't heavy anymore. It's just quiet, the kind of quiet that belongs to peace, not secrets. My mother talks more now. Sometimes we sit by the kitchen window with tea, and she tells me about her childhood, about the dreams she once had before fear made her small. She never says Lena's name out loud, but when her eyes glisten and she smiles faintly, I know who she's thinking of. I went back to St. Helena's one more time. It's nothing but rubble now, a patch of land fenced off for redevelopment. The grass has started to grow wild again, pushing through cracks in the old stone foundation. I stood there for a while, feeling the breeze, and whispered a soft thank you. Not because I understood everything, but because I survived it. Sometimes I still wonder which parts were real and which parts were memories that didn't belong to me. Maybe that's the thing about truth. It's not always clean or certain. It's messy. It leaves stains. But I've learned that telling it, even when your voice shakes, is better than living in silence. The town doesn't talk about it anymore. To them, it was just another strange story that passed through and faded. But for me, it's the reason I wake up every morning and look in the mirror, not to check for her reflection, but to remind myself that I'm whole, that I'm both of us. Last week, I found an old cassette player in the attic covered in dust. Inside was a tape with no label. When I pressed play, the sound crackled before settling into a soft hum. Then a little girl's laughter filled the room, bright, unbroken, and free. My breath caught. I sat there listening until the tape stopped, tears blurring the edges of everything. That laugh, it wasn't just hers. It was ours. And in that moment, I realized something. The truth wasn't just about remembering what happened. It was about reclaiming every piece of myself they tried to take away. So now, every night before I sleep, I whisper her name softly into the dark, not as a ghost, not as a regret, but as a promise. Good night, Lena. Because finally, after all this time, we both get to rest.